Got some great characters in the Gospel of John, which we're going to visit in the next couple of weeks. And I hope that you'll read these lessons through with us through Lent. They're long lessons. John's Gospel has these long stories that you really just can't take a bit of and put it in the Gospel reading. You've got to read the whole story. So, today we hear the story of Nicodemus, the Jewish leader who comes to Jesus by night. Next week we're going to hear this great story about the woman at the well, who Jesus offers this living water to. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to hear the story about the man born blind, who ultimately gets kicked out of the synagogue for confessing Jesus. And these stories are great because in each character, we can see our own faith that the person brings out. We see our own faith being lived out in these characters. And maybe you can access it in one of these characters in the coming weeks. I certainly hope so. But today I want to talk about Nicodemus, this idea that Jesus comes at night to meet with Nicodemus. And you wonder how they set it up. Did they just run into each other in a dark alley? Or did Nicodemus's people have to go to Jesus' people and set it up on the down low? Or, how did this all happen? Anyway, they meet at night, which in John's Gospel means something. John's Gospel is very symbolic. So meeting at night means that it's a hidden meeting. It means that Nicodemus has something to hide, right? That he doesn't want the rest of the leadership to know that he is meeting with Jesus and saying these things to Jesus. And he says to Jesus, "We know that you come from God," because no one can do these signs, right? And the signs meaning, the miracle at the wedding in Cana of Galilee, the healings that Jesus has done. No one can do these signs without being from God. So we know that something is going on. We see something special in you. And without asking a question, Jesus almost interrupts him and says, yes, very truly, you can't be from heaven unless you're born of the Spirit, born of water. And this idea of being born again comes up. Right? And again, you might see your own faith a little bit in Nicodemus. I know I certainly do. I grew up as a cradle Episcopalian, what we call it. We grew up in the church. I was baptized in the Episcopal Church when I was about 6 months old. And when we moved to the town that we lived in my teenage years, they made me an acolyte. So I'd sit back here behind this wall, kind of where Molly Rose and Hannah are sitting, and I'd listen to the sermons. I'd listen to the readings at both the 8 o'clock service and the 10 o'clock service. I'd fall asleep during the sermons. I would gaze on the altar, and I can still remember it like it was yesterday. My parents were educators, and I think because of that, maybe partly because of that, my faith was somewhat tepid, if you can say that, right? I was Episcopalian, I was mainline Protestant, and it wasn't proper, maybe it still isn't, to really talk about your faith openly. There wasn't so much shame involved as it was just kind of a challenge to really pin down how you felt about things. Like, I knew that I loved Jesus, but I wasn't about to tell anyone that, right? I knew that somehow my salvation was procured through his death on the cross, yet I wasn't going to talk to my best friend at a hockey game about that, right? I wasn't going to bring anyone to the altar. I certainly wasn't going to parade around in my acolyte shirt at school. So how do you understand your faith when it's not out there, right? And you meet people in your life, as I have met, and they say to you, "Are you born again?" Or as I got once, "Have you been saved?" And as Episcopalians, we might be on the wrong foot. Or we might not know how to answer it in a way that's satisfactory. Because we don't want to disappoint people. Right? And you almost want to say to somebody, "Thank you so much for asking about my salvation. I appreciate your interest." Spiritual life. Thank you for caring so much to ask me that question. I say that I'm saved every time I say the creed. Every time I pray to Jesus, I'm reminded of my own salvation, of my own entrance into God's kingdom. Every time. So it's not a once and done deal for me. How do you explain that, though? There's so many mysterious things about God that everyone, no matter whether you're fundamentalist or Episcopalian or even atheist, you can't explain it, right? I mean, it almost makes it easier to not believe in God because at least you can kind of say, well, we don't know what's there, so we're not going to try to talk about it. You know? But for you, you have a belief. There is something in the core of your being that says, there is something there. Whether you want to call it a higher power, a hidden grace, you know, a home that you go to at the end of the day, at the end of your life, whatever it is, you have that belief. Don't let anyone take that from you, and don't let anyone question it. Because I'm here to tell you that it's real. That got you out of bed in church this morning, it is something real. And it needs to be respected. And I think to some degree, when Jesus says, are you a teacher of Israel, and yet you do not understand these things? We can kind of take that and be a little affronted by it. I know I did. When I was growing up, this lesson never made any sense to me. Because you hear these questions that Jesus has. Jesus says, look, you've got to be born again. You've got to be born of water and the Spirit. And Nicodemus takes it a little literally, yeah. He says, you mean being born again? How can you go back into your mother's womb and be born again? It doesn't make sense. Let me tell you, a lot of this doesn't make sense. Okay? But that's probably one of the more nonsensical things you read in Scripture. And Jesus just kind of washes over it like it's no big deal. You're a teacher of Israel and you don't understand this? Well, yeah. I've come to church for 47 years and there are things that I don't understand. I've lived my whole life as a believer in Christ, and yet I can't explain some of the things that I see up here. I confess Christ with my whole being, and Holy Week is such a moment of intense spiritual devotion for me, and yet there are things in the Passion of Christ that I can't even begin to explain or talk about without becoming a puddle of tears. So yeah, Jesus, I can be a teacher in the church and not understand these things. Now, there are some midrash that believe that Jesus was kind of being humorous. And to some of us, we fail to see the humor in his comment. But I think a lot of us who live in the 21st century, who have that Nicodemus-like faith, where we have questions, we want to inquire about things, we're not really sure, and we meet other people who are so rock-solid sure, and they have all the answers. And they look at us and they say, and you call yourself a believer? That can put us on the wrong foot. That can put us on the wrong foot. We had a vestry retreat this weekend, and Friday night we had a little social gathering at which I kind of inserted a little programmatic question. I kind of said, what do you think our core values are at St. Margaret's? And we, talked about things like community, talked about things like inclusivity and openness. One of the ones that came up as we got deeper into the evening was inquiring. That this is a church that is not afraid to ask questions. And it was really brought out mostly in the old adult formation group called the Heretics, which has been reborn as the Seekers. Yes, born again. It's been reborn as the Seekers, where we really seek to inquire. We ask questions. Like Nicodemus. And we shouldn't be afraid to ask those questions, no matter how sure we are in our faith. And I think one of the problems in the world is that we have a lot of people who are so sure of the answers, and not enough people who are confident in the questions. Now the flip side of this is that while we want to be inquiring, we also want to make sure that we're not too much like the other camp. Laughing at questions, dismissing opinions, negating ideas that we might not agree with. This is a wonderful open community, but we also have to realize that when ideas and positions that come up that rub us the wrong way, there is a way to treat those positions and opinions that might be more Christ-like than other ways. We can listen to people without forming a debating rebuttal. Am I making sense? Right? So I think when Nicodemus went to Jesus, he had questions. And the great thing about Nicodemus is that he kept asking questions. How can these things be? He wanted to learn. Right? When you meet someone who believes differently than you, when you meet someone whose values may be abhorrent to you, or you believe someone who has a different opinion about something than you talk to that person and you ask, why do you feel this way? Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of that. Respect that person's dignity. See them as a child of God, as you would want them to see you as a child of God. I think it's important for every community that calls itself an open community to have those values of both inquiry and also respect for differing opinions. I think with Nicodemus, we can see ourselves in that story very clearly. As people who live a 21st century faith that might not look to be on the outside like it's on fire, but yet is very, very deep. And don't believe for 1 minute that if you ask questions about your faith, or you're uncertain about some things, or you have some doubts, that negates your faith. Because I've often said that faith without doubt really isn't faith at all. It's something else. So own your doubts. Own your inquiries like Nicodemus did. And you will find yourself at the end of the story of John, perhaps honoring Jesus in the loving way that Nicodemus did. If you remember that Nicodemus was the one that petitioned the Sanhedrin to allow Jesus' body to be buried by Joseph of Arimathea. So Nicodemus may have been a secret follower. His faith might not have been worn on a t-shirt or out in public, but his actions did the talking for him. He went out and he loved. He went out and he respected and honored people. And that is what we can do as people of faith. We can be that inquiring, respecting, honoring, loving place. Amen.